Hey guys, Chris Clark here. I got to sit down with Meyer Burnett and Witney Seibold, two of my favorite competitors in the Schmo Down. One is a film director that inspired me to no end, and one is a fantastic film critic with a great, marvelous personality, and is just a great guy. So just sit back, relax, enjoy these two extensive interviews, and enjoy the show. Let's rock this sucker. I'm here with Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, Robert, how are you today, Robert? I know this has been a rough week.
I'm good. I'm good. You know, between recording Heroes, doing Schmo Down stuff, and I'm working on this crisis medicine masterclass series that I've been doing for a long time that I produced and directed, and I'm editing. So I'm trying to finish a 90-minute piece on hemorrhage control.
Seriously?
Yeah.
The life of a filmmaker and editor.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy indeed. So we haven't talked to you since Blofeld's Cat made their debut. So I have some questions about your matches, about everything that you have done so far up until the Fatal Five-Way. So what I'm going to go is this. Going into your match with Schnepp and Hector, what was going through your head? Because that's...
Hector! Hector! No. Well, that was what was going through my head.
Yeah.
You know, it was interesting because Andreyko and I hadn't been on the same team before, and I've known Mark for a long time. I've really admired him. He's a top-notch comic book writer and an artist. I first became aware of him with a series called Torso. That was actually it's a story about Elliot Ness after the Untouchables. It's a true story.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, I was reading a lot of his DC work, and I'm a huge fan of him as a person. So it was fun to be on a team with him. You know, I still think we have to get our rhythms down, but it was fun the first match when we both answered the question charade at the same time.
Oh.
So, because we have similar bases of knowledge. So, although he knows more about musicals than I do.
Oh well, I would think Mark would. Going off of Mark, what are your thoughts of him as a teammate?
Oh, I love him. He's a lot of fun. I mean, you know, there are times when he chimes in fast, and I know the answer too, but it's fine. That's fine. I don't like. I'll tell you, it's interesting because now that there's this added pressure in the Schmoedown, like when I first started, I just didn't care. I was like, okay, you know, I'll do this. It was fun with Team Heroes, but as I started playing a character or being this character, and it's really myself. It's an aspect of myself. But then it started to get the pressure has been, to be honest, getting to me. Like I haven't been doing well. When I didn't care, I knew all these answers. But like the match with Top 10, when we first started out, there were questions like Chris O'Donnell or Bob Hoskins. I mean, I knew those answers, and it's just really weird because my mind went blank, and I'm like, Chris O'Donnell, I've seen Scent of a Woman 100 times. You know, I've watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I worked on the DVD special features, and I was doing all kinds of things, and I can't believe like I would just forget Bob Hoskins' name, but it's really weird. Sometimes you just see someone's face, and you within the context of the Schmoedown, it just doesn't come to you. It's like your brain and your mouth doesn't work, and that happens to me more and more, which is frustrating.
Yeah, it's like going complete white room, like in theater, where you just blank for no reason. It's just the pressure of the situation.
Yeah, it's weird because I think I put the pressures more on myself. You know, like when I first started doing it, I just did it for fun because people had asked me to go on it, and I didn't think about it much. But now that there's this whole fan base, and now I'm going on the other end because people are like, Burnett's a washed-up has-been. You know, it's just like, what are you gonna do?
Those comments, you just have to sigh. It's terrible.
Oh yeah, well no, but it's true but in the context of the game, if you're not winning and you're a mediocre player, you know, you can't. The proof is in the pudding. So I can't get angry. Although it was really nice to defeat Schnepp and Navarra. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
But they almost won though. I mean, they came back when they got. I couldn't believe he spun. They both spun comic book movies for Team Heroes has done that 3 times now.
I know. Speaking of Team Heroes, do you feel that your wins on Heroes should have transferred to Blofeld's Cat?
I do, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I do, because they were still team wins for me. You know, I think it's weird. I mean, some of those things you should get, like, my team record should be my team record. You know, I mean, you're a team player. I mean, I did pretty well. I played with both Campia and Schnepp, and those victories both counted. So why wouldn't your total team record translate? But I understand if you're keeping team records. I mean, if you're an individual player and you move teams, your team record should stand as a total record of your team victories.
Yeah, especially the one with you and Campia, because Schnepp had nothing to do with that. But yeah, I mean,
Right.
it's a complication. I can understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you get the name Blofeld's Cat?
Well, it's funny because, you know, I'm a huge James Bond fan, and we were going to be like House Harkonnen, like from Dune. And I think Andreyko said, why don't we just call ourselves the Tasty Bitches? And I'm like, we could do that. But, you know, you have to run these names by Harloff, too. And I thought Blofeld's Cat was absurd enough. Because here's the thing. You know, I think a team name should be fun. Like, it should be, you can either be pretentious and sort of, or be fun. And, like, Andreyko and I are I think we're funny guys. We want to have a good time. And Blofeld's Cat is sort of this absurdist thing. A lot of people didn't even know who Blofeld was. And I found that I don't understand why people are so adamantly opposed to the James Bond category. I mean, when I was a kid, I loved James Bond. Like, I was a James Bond fanatic. Every night, well, not every night, but they used to show in the prehistoric home video era, when James Bond movies aired on TV, everybody watched them. You know, your parents would let you have to beg to stay up because they were long. And I'd always have to beg to stay up past my bedtime. But it was like, tonight on the ABC Sunday Night Movie, Sean Connery is James Bond and Diamonds Are Forever, you know. And I like that. I like that we picked the name Blofeld's Cat. Because if you're a James Bond fan, you smile at that. But there's a lot of people that aren't, you know. And when I was growing up, there was basically a new James Bond movie in the theater every 2 years. And then in 1989, when License to Kill came out, that was the last Bond film until 1995. So there was a 6-year gap, and a lot of people, when they were growing up, they weren't, you know, Bond fans, and that was something I thought Blofeld's Cat honored that, because I mean, I loved it. I thought it was funny.
Yeah,
you know, somebody said we should do a children's book, a Blofeld's Cat children's book that's all about how Blofeld's Cat is really the mastermind behind Spectre. Like toxoplasmosis has caused Blofeld himself to become completely controlled by the cat. It's really the cat who is the ultimate villain in the Bond franchise, and I like that idea.
You heard it here first. You heard it here first, folks. Oh my goodness, that sounds awesome. Going off of the James Bond topic, what are your thoughts on the franchise not being in the Inner Geekdom anymore, but being in now the regular Schmoedown, but not being an actual category, but in the spy movie?
Yeah, I mean, I have a problem with what Inner Geekdom is, because when I was growing up, you were being a Star Wars fan and a Lord of the Rings, or Star Trek fan and Lord of the Rings and comic books. Those were truly geeky because we were all outliers. And the world I'm old enough that I've watched the world change. And to me, like Harry Potter was always a worldwide phenomenon, from the books to the movies. Why is that geeky? Because it's fantasy. Lord of the Rings is truly geeky because you know Tolkien and all that. But to me, Harry Potter was something that built on all these other different fantasy series when I was growing up. So I think The Hobbit, definitely adding The Hobbit should be part of it, just because people don't like the Hobbit movies as much as the Lord of the Rings films, and I understand why. I mean, the tone is different, and it's not about the end of the world. but it's still part of Tolkien, and J.R.R. Tolkien's work is inherently uber geeky. Whereas, like, I mean, every kid grew up in the post Harry Potter era belonging to, you know, they're either a Hufflepuff or a Gryffindor. I mean, every single kid in the world knows what those houses are. So why is that geeky? I mean, that to me is Harry Potter is the most mainstream thing ever. And I think that now more than ever, because James Bond is nothing if not geeky now. It's way geekier than Harry Potter is. And the fact that so many people fight against whether or not it's geeky or not proves it to me. But you know, take it out. I'm just surprised. I mean, they're making the 25th. If you just go by the official Bond movies, there's going to be 25 of them. It's one of the longest running film series of all time. Then you've got Casino Royale, the Barry Nelson TV version. Then there's the Casino Royale comedy from the late 60s. Then there's the Kevin McClory produced Never Say Never Again, you know, from 1983. I mean, there's all kinds of different things. I mean, it's totally geeky, but, you know, what can you say? See, the problem is this. I think that our audience, the Schmoedown audience, is basically college age. The target audience is college age and older. And if you go back far enough, I mean, unfortunately, the fact is, if you go pre-1980, a lot of people are like, they tune out. You know, even Close Encounters, Star Wars is 40 years old this year. And if you go back even further, I mean, there's so many movies that I grew up with. Like, I think the Planet of the Apes series is geeky.
I would agree with that, too. There's like six of the original series that are just awesome.
Yeah, well, five. Yeah. There's five.
Five, that's what I meant.
Five. Yeah, and then there's Tim Burton's remake, and then there's the 3 new films. I mean, and the original Planet of the Apes, you know, movies were to me very, very geeky, and it's interesting because it is generational. But what I find sort of strange now is that when I was a kid, I wanted to see every science fiction film ever made, and all the way back to George Méliès in A Trip to the Moon or Metropolis in 1927. And to me, I just knew that, okay, in 1927, that was the end of the sound era. I mean, we're still watching silent movies. If you're a filmmaker and you wanted to be a filmmaker, as I did, you would watch everything. But now I understand, like, I can't get my young nephew to watch a Godzilla movie after he grew up with Jurassic Park, because in his mind, he can't leap beyond the fact that I'm looking at a man in a suit stomping on a bunch of balsa wood models of a city. Like, you can't. When I was growing up, I just put my mind in the era of which a film was made. When I was 5 years old, my favorite movie was the original War of the Worlds. It was made in 1953, and I loved it. I still love it, and I try and show it to people today, and they're like, "But you can see the wires on the Martian war machines," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, but that's all they could do," and it did win an Academy Award for visual effects. So, you know.
Well, look, James Bond is like, it's just it's a franchise that should be considered geek. I understand your argument, and I agree with it completely. Moving on, what was your thoughts on the top 10 match with you in top 10?
Well, you know, I started slow in that match. I didn't play that. That's why I forgot Bob Hoskins and Chris O'Donnell, and I again I just felt pressure because it was like, it's Roca. You know, it's Roca and Nost, my old teammates. But you know what? At the end of the day, and people are like, "Oh, you know, Andrejko carried you," but there's a lot of answers that I knew that Andrejko just blurted out really quickly, which is great because it alleviates the pressure. But that was still at the time, what was it, 34-29?
You would have won. Yeah, you would have won in a normal match. Yeah.
Top 10. I mean, that's a huge scoring matchup for both teams. I mean, that at the time they it didn't stand for very long, but that was the highest scoring team match ever in terms of a single team top 10 scoring 34 points. I mean, that was I thought a great match.
It was fantastic.
And, yeah, I don't think that there's anything to be ashamed of. I mean, you know, did I play as well as Andrejko? No. You know, but look, I still pulled out the almost famous question. I don't think that Andrejko would have known that. I know it was a 2-point question, but still, I mean, it's very interesting because I don't feel, you know, when I'm doing the Schmoedown, it's just fun. You know, you go and when you record them in the studio, it's so much fun. And everybody is so nice. Like I like everybody that is involved with Schmoedown, both in front of and behind the cameras. And it's just fun to hang out there. And it's really weird when you see people online, they turn it into something like I'm having a great time regardless of whether I win or lose or whatever. It's so much fun because everybody is so cool. And, you know, I think what Christian has done and what Mark Ellis has done and by designing this and when guys like Roca they take a bigger role behind the scenes, it's a lot of fun. It's a cool look. If you're not having fun watching the Schmoedown and we're not having fun playing the Schmoedown, that's when it's over. But right now it's a lot of fun. And I think anybody who's been watching the team tournament, oh my God. I mean, talk about excitement. And I know that the singles matches are just going to be just as exciting. I mean, it's a great thing. I mean, everyone's bracket was getting busted from the very beginning, and that's what it's all about. That's what makes it fun.
Yep.
So I'm happy. I'm honored to be a part of it all.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's so unpredictable, as you were saying. The Fatal Five-Way. You were in the Fatal Five-Way this week. What were your thoughts on that match, man?
Well, that was fun. I mean, you know, I've always loved Ben. It was cool to see him come out, and I love team action. I think team action is exactly what the Schmoedown needed because, you know, you got these two handsome guys that are smart and funny, and they actually really study. Like they've studied like every Schmoedown match. I mean, they're on it. They are a dangerous, formidable group of two gentlemen that are going to go far in the Schmoedown because they take it very seriously. And, you know, Jason Inman is one of the nicest guys in the world, and it was really cool to watch him have such a great match. And I also love seeing Scott Mantz kind of eat it. Because, again, I love Scott Mantz, but he talks a good game, and it's nice to see when he gets put in his place. I love that.
It's hilarious.
It's fantastic. But that's what it's fun. I kind of had a mid-range game, and I started not well, but I think I didn't embarrass myself.
No, you didn't. You did great. You did great.
It was all right. You know, it was cool. But again, that was a day that Ben was new and Inman was new. Inman's success, it was great to watch. It was fun to be a part of. You know, and it was because you know you do feel good when you win a Schmoedown. I'm not going to lie.
I can imagine.
It does not suck to win Schmoedowns.
Speaking of Inman, who do you think is going to win, Inman or Roca?
You know, I don't know. I mean, Roca's a tough competitor, but then again, Inman, if he gets it really is the spin of the wheel. If you get your strong suit in questions, and if Roca spins badly, if he doesn't get frickin' sports movies or something like that, or Rocky films, or what, you can win. It really is up to the wheel and your knowledge, but Roca's a tough competitor. I mean, I'd like to see Jason go further just because, like, he's new and fresh blood, and it would be fun to watch him succeed. But I also, you know, I like the Outlaw. But awesome. It's going to be a tough match. I mean, I hope. Again, sometimes if you have a great match that's fun to watch, that's what I like most of all. I think that's when it's the coolest
and the most unpredictable.
Yeah.
Final question: what do you think your future is in Inner Geekdom? You kind of alluded to stepping back or something in your post interview. Are you gonna still be there?
I don't know. I mean, it was fun. Like, I helped start that category, and it would be nice to come back and win again. But I have to tell you, you know, there's people that have, like Rachel Cushing, who I think is great. She has a really broad base of knowledge when it comes to fantasy, and I think part of my problem too is that I've just been watching movies for longer than a lot of people. And I kind of come at it differently. And so part of what happens is I think as much knowledge as I have, it trips me up a lot because I second guess myself. Just because I've been alive longer. but I don't know. I mean, I'd like to come back, but again, the inner geekdom is it's a tough category, and they keep adding to it. I mean, I'm not going to go back and watch the Hobbit movies more than I have, because the Hobbit movies aren't nearly as, I don't enjoy them as much as I enjoy the Hobbit. I mean, as I enjoy Lord of the Rings, and I still haven't seen all the Harry Potter movies, because Harry Potter is just, I like those movies, but it's about a character I didn't grow up with. So to me, it's like watching a kid in high school. It's kind of like I don't watch John Hughes movies much anymore. I mean, because I saw them. They should add that as a geek category. I mean, I think they are, but like, part of it is what you're watching as you move through life. And if you grew up with the Harry Potter movies, it makes sense. But I was kind of old, so I didn't read all the Harry Potter books, and the movies were not something that I was particularly eager for the way I'm eager for. I've loved the Marvel universe my whole life, or the DC universe, so I'm the first person to be in line for Avengers or Infinity War or Justice League or whatever. I love those movies because they go back to my childhood. So it's kind of hard if you don't have that, if you don't have a connection to the inner geekdom, and if you have to go back and watch it later, I'll never watch the Harry Potter movies with the same mindset a Star Trek movie where I took in every single detail. I watch Harry Potter movies and I enjoy them. I didn't think the first one was particularly good. I thought it was a movie that was about magic that was not magical. It was too much of it was slavishly devoted to the book, and I didn't think it was enough of a movie. So I don't, and so much of the movies are repetitive to me. I know it's sacrilegious. People are like, oh my God, they're dissing Harry Potter. No, I'm not. I really like what Harry Potter is for the people that grew up with those films, but it's not my thing. Yeah. So it'll never be a strong suit in that category. It'll always be a weakness for me. Mm-hmm. So to go in knowing it's a weakness, it's rough, because I'll never get a lot of those questions.
I hope to see you again soon in the inner geekdom, and you'll have better luck. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'll tell you, if I studied harder,
well,
I would be better off. I mean, I should sit down. If I ever do inner geekdom matches, I would study harder. Mm-hmm. Just as and like Suicide Squad, for instance. I missed a Suicide Squad question, and I hated Suicide Squad. I hated it. And I will never watch that movie. I didn't buy that movie. I never want to see that movie ever again. So I just don't care. And when I was watching it, and that's a problem. If you're going to be fighting in the inner geekdom category, you have to have, look, I love all kinds of cheesy horror exploitation films that a lot of people wouldn't watch today. Like, I would love them to do an exploitation films from the 70s and 80s category, because there's a lot of people that are younger, that even horror fanatics, they haven't watched Hammer horror movies from the 60s, where I have watched all of them. And it really depends. It's knowledge.
Well, people don't know that horror is actually one of your big strengths then. Probably
right.
Is. Yeah. Wow.
Yes, it is. I mean, I know a lot about horror films, and I mean, I produced a horror movie. I produced the Hills on Red, cool. Which you can get on Warner Home Video on DVD. But yeah, so it's a big category for me. I love horror, and I think the problem is that the Schmoedown, we have classic categories, but it is really focused on the last 25 years of movies. Mm-hmm. And I watched movies differently as I got older, because I was working in the business, and I wasn't sitting at home in my dorm room watching my favorite movies over and over and over again like I used to when I was a kid. And I'm trying to go back and catch up on movies I missed when I was growing up. So, but that sounds like an excuse. I don't mean it to sound like an excuse.
Oh, no, it doesn't sound like an excuse, Rob. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It was great. Thanks so much.
Oh, sure. No problem.
Awesome. So, Rob, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter, as always, at BurnettRM, or on Instagram at RMBurnett, or find me on Facebook at Robert Meyer Burnett.
Thank you so much, Robert. This was a blast, and keep rocking. Well, Whitney, that happened.
Yeah, that happened.
Yeah. Look, here,
it kind of took us by surprise too. You know it or you don't, and some things we just didn't. I feel like we got a few trick questions like in the Hitchcock one about sort of the number of shots without any dialogue. Like, clearly we were supposed to answer Psycho, but, it's one of those trivia things that
It tripped you up.
we
really
knew,
bad,
but
yeah.
we didn't. Yeah, it kind of tripped us up a little bit. I saw a really amusing comment actually about how much more difficult our questions were as opposed to our teammates, and the joke was, for critically acclaimed, can you answer? Tell us which film that Hitchcock shot only on a Tuesday morning had 430 words within the first scene, and our opponent's questions were, can you name a movie?
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of the controversy has come from. My question is, before the match, what were your thoughts going into it?
Well, I was a little nervous. This was sort of a baptism by fire for me personally. I wasn't sure, what to expect in sort of the ultimate tournament that we were entering into, and so I wasn't sure, like, if the questions were going to be harder, if our opponents were going to be, that much more challenging. It turned out the format was sort of the same, and the questions were a little bit harder, I guess, in that I didn't kind of instantly know the answer to most of them.
Yeah, the first round especially, it was evident. What were your thoughts on Late to the Party as a team?
They seemed nice. They seemed a little bit kind of taken off balance by the whole thing, I think. They were... I know they got to make their usual looks like Hart Bochner from Die Hard joke, which I think was being encouraged by a lot of the people over at Collider. I don't mind. Hart Bochner's a handsome dude. He's a successful actor. Who else would I want to look like?
Sooner or later, that joke is going to get a little stale.
Yeah, well, it's going to get... And especially, I got a haircut recently, so I don't look as much like Hart Bochner anymore.
That'll be awkward. Do you think picking Hitchcock in the end was the right decision? What happened with that one question?
I think Hitchcock was fine, especially with William on my team. William actually just recently got to write a review of a gigantic Alfred Hitchcock box set. So he watched a lot of these movies, like I think about 15 of them, all in rapid succession just recently. So Hitchcock was like really fresh in his mind. Plus, he grew up loving Hitchcock. So having William in my corner for a Hitchcock category was no big thing. And, I'm no slouch when it comes to Hitchcock. I haven't seen quite as many as William, but I've seen them. And, I feel like I've seen more than, like, maybe the average. So, yeah, I was comfortable with Hitchcock. I would have been more comfortable. I know occasionally a Stanley Kubrick category comes up.
Ooh.
I would have been far more comfortable with Stanley Kubrick. I'm far more familiar with his work than I am with Hitchcock, but Hitchcock's no slouch.
I would tell Christian that, and maybe he could put that on the wheel next time. That'd be interesting. Yeah. After your loss, what were your thoughts, and how did you guys feel, and what happened?
Oh, we were a little humbled. We were kind of hoping to keep on rolling forward. I've seen some of the brackets, and I know some people had picked us to win the whole thing. And, we felt like we let a lot of people down. But, we still had a good time, and we'll be back. It's just going to take us a little while to sort of, get done licking our wounds and working our way back into the system.
Yeah, I really hope you guys do return like sooner rather than later. I know that the Ultimate Schmoedown is probably going to take a lot of dates away, but that's probably the most disappointing thing is that we probably won't see you guys for a little bit. But when you do return, do you have any plans on a new strategy?
Well, it's kind of hard to strategize. The only thing you can really kind of strategize is maybe ask for certain categories on the wheel, or decide ahead of time which categories we're going to be better at. I think the first time we charged out, we were a little confident, so we just took the first category that we landed on, thinking, we can handle anything. But now we've learned that we can't handle everything. So we're just trying to zero in on the things that we know a little bit better. There's unfortunately, there's not much we can do in terms of study. We already know the movies. We know them or we don't. Just kind of watch more Schmoedown and see what types of questions are being asked and see if we can bone up on sort of any holes in our education.
So, Whitney, how did you get involved in the Schmoedown?
It was just something a lot of my peers were already involved with. I know a lot of people who are on it, not just William Bibiani, but Brianne Chandler had been on our podcast before. Krista Lemire and Matt Atchity and Gray Drake, all of these people. Or I guess Krista Lemire hasn't been on the Schmoedown, has she?
I don't think she has.
No, but Gray Drake and Matt Atchity were on the Schmoedown. And Scott Mance, and all of these people are sort of people in the critical community. And just one day is like, hey, that looks like fun. I want to give that a shot. So I asked around, and then they finally sort of roped me into the orbit of the Schmoedown.
Out of curiosity, could you describe your Schmoedown character?
Oh, well, it sort of grew out of what William was already doing over there. He had sort of sold himself as the Beast, and he even decided to come up with a cute hashtag, a Twitter hashtag to go along with it, growl, growl. So when I came along, we decided to sort of do it together since we were already podcast co-hosts on 2 different podcasts together. Because I was always sort of maybe contrarian is the wrong word, but kind of just the arrogant one of the 2 of us. We decided to sort of play that up a little bit and play up my own vanity, and so we came up with the Beauty. I also have nicer clothes than William, so I just wore my nice suit, and we were able to sort of play up the vanity angle.
The 3-piece suit that I think Matt Nost was making fun of. It's hilarious.
Yeah, 3-piece suit with a button-down collar, that's a thing. That's acceptable. It's not like right after Labor Day. That's an acceptable fashion choice. I object to his objections.
Yeah, it was really stylish. Would you ever try the singles division? Anyone you would like to face?
Oh, absolutely. It seems like it would be a lot of fun. I know the questions are I don't, and so I don't really have a full bead on every single competitor. So I would most like to compete against, of course, my friends, the people I know going in, knew beforehand. So I would love to go head-to-head against Scott Mance. Scott Mance and I are both big Trekkies. He more than I, of course, because no one else in the world is a bigger Trekkie than Scott Mance. But I would love to go head-to-head with him in a sort of a Trek battle. My dream match would be, of course, to go up against Leonard Maltin, who has kind of announced his candidacy for the Schmoedown. And even though he hasn't proven himself yet in the Schmoedown world, he at the very least is Leonard frickin' Maltin.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to write questions for him. He's like an encyclopedia. Actually, my next question goes off on that. What are your thoughts on the potential match against him and his daughter, with you and Critically Acclaimed?
Well, the gauntlet has been thrown, and the great thing about going head-to-head with Leonard Maltin is if we beat Leonard and Jesse Maltin, we're gods, and if we lose to Leonard and Jesse Maltin, no big loss. They're the Maltins, and they know more about movies than just about anybody. So yeah, I think it would be gratifying either way. It would be just an honor to share the stage with those 2.
You should not feel ashamed if you lose to them. That's all I have to say. Nope. Now, out of curiosity, how did you and Bibbs first meet?
Well, we went to this orgy with Adam West and Frank Gorshin. No, that's not how we met. We were actually just neighbors. We lived in the same building here in Los Angeles. He left his door open and was playing. He was playing a video game with a soundtrack I recognized, and I burst in, like, what song is that? And that's sort of how we started to talk. And it turns out, we were both film writers, we were both critics of some stripe, we were both obsessives. There were a few obscure movies that we were both obsessed with. We bonded over our mutual love of Phil Eldon Robinson's Sneakers and Brain Donors, an obscure comedy from the early 90s that we both really loved. He turned me on to a website called Geekscape, which I started writing for many years ago, and you can still find my articles up on Geekscape. And eventually, sort of, we branched off together, and when it came time for the website he was writing for, Crave Online, to launch their own podcast, and this was way back in 2011, he asked me to be his co-host, first thing, and we thought this was great. The name The B-Movies Podcast, we thought up in literally 1 second. There wasn't a bunch of names in a hat, and we weren't really sort of torturing ourselves. Like, what do we call it? I don't know, B-Movies. We like B-Movies. We'll call it the B-Movies Podcast. And that name sort of stuck. even though it's really sort of a misnomer, we didn't cover just B movies. We covered actually the A movies.
It's stuck though, and I am gonna miss that. That was one of my favorite podcasts. Is there any plan on bringing that back?
Well, I can't say anything for sure right now. We do plan to bring it back in some format or another. Just not necessarily the Boo Movies podcast, but the two of us reviewing films in podcast form together. But we don't know. We have a few sort of ideas in the pipeline, with various outlets, and we'll let you know if any of those takes hold.
Awesome. What is your relationship with Quentin Tarantino, out of curiosity?
Oh, well, he's my boss.
Yeah.
I run the projector over at the New Beverly Cinema in Hollywood, California, and as everyone knows, Quentin is a big 35mm film buff. So every film we show at the New Beverly is either on 35 or 16mm film.
Wow.
And yeah, we've been extensively trained on these machines, and we put on good shows. There's like a different double bill pretty much every 48 hours over there. So, and Quentin Tarantino owns that theater. This is no big secret. He bought it several years ago and took over the programming maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And yeah, so he's the one who owns the building where I work.
Fantastic. Where did your love of movies and films begin?
It's not one of the. Sadly, I don't have a very romantic story because I wasn't one of those kids who went to see Raiders of the Lost Ark when I was 3 and fell in love with the cinema form. Actually, was sort of indifferent to movies throughout a lot of my childhood. I watched them. There were a lot I liked, but I didn't sort of follow the same ones my peers followed. And I found ones eventually that I really, really loved. Like when I was 11 years old, Gremlins 2, the new batch, was released in theaters, and I watched that one kind of incessantly. Yeah, it wasn't until the early 90s that I started watching movies multiple times in theaters. And then when I was 16, my sister, I have an older sister who was working for a movie theater in Santa Monica, California, she got me a job, my first job, which was at the Criterion, which sadly is now defunct, on the 3rd Street Promenade. Nothing to do with the home video company. It used to be an old stage back in the 1920s. It was converted into a sixplex in the 90s, and in the mid-90s I started working there. And I started talking to other film obsessives and sort of paying attention to the way films were released. And it wasn't until then that I started really, really kind of plunging my feet deep into the world of cinema.
Mm-hmm.
And, this was the mid-90s, so this was kind of a golden time because there were the mainstream flicks everybody talks about, but it was also a huge indie boom going on at the time. So there were a lot of really interesting, fascinating films coming out of the indie world, and there were plenty of indie theaters in my neighborhood. So I was seeing, and I could see movies for free thanks to my position at a movie theater. So I started just watching whatever I could for no reason. To just watch whatever, just so I'd have comparative notes.
Fantastic. I mean,
by the time I got to college, in the late 90s, movies are kind of my passion. I wish I could just sort of talk about movies or write about movies for a living.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where it went.
Damn, and you're succeeding at it. As a film critic, who are your biggest influences?
Oh, well, Roger Ebert, obviously. I mean, he's everybody's influence, I think. Unless, of course, you're Roger Ebert's age, then you have older critics to go to. But Roger Ebert was kind of the one I first started reading obsessively when I was in college, and all of his reviews were getting archived online, so I was able to read just everything that he was writing. And in many ways, he taught me how to think about movies, which was one important rule: just give every film an even shake. You can't go in, expecting something to be great or expecting something to be bad. You just let the film say what it has to say. And, if it's a big mainstream blockbuster, if it's highly anticipated, or if it's a tiny little indie, it doesn't matter. You have to sort of treat it fairly. He was very good about being sort of populist, but also championing little films as well. And he sort of led me into the arms of other sort of critics who are my contemporaries, people like Karina Longworth and Andy Klein. Well, Andy Klein's not my contemporary, but I read a lot of him. And the people from the Village Voice, and reading a lot of these film critics also sort of sharpened my voice into sort of the snot realm that I'm known for. get to sort of see these highfalutin films and thumb my nose a little bit at big mainstream blockbusters.
It's a great personality.
Well, thank you.
People, there are obvious similarities between you and Bibbs and Roger Ebert and Siskel. There is. Like,
it's kind of you to say, but we're nowhere near in those guys' caliber.
It's still interesting. Lastly, how did Canceled Too Soon begin, and what is your favorite episode?
Well, Canceled Too Soon, not to brag, but that was my idea. Back in 2014, I spent several months as the head film critic for Nerdist, and while I was there, they said, keep pitching us ideas, so I would, pretty much on a daily basis, pitch new ideas for articles, or for essays, or for editorials, and for podcasts to my editors. Every single one of them was shot down, all of my podcast ideas. They didn't like anything I had to say over at Nerdist. It's pretty hilarious that they hired me to begin with. But, one of the ideas I had was Canceled Too Soon, a podcast devoted to shows that lasted a very short amount of time, mostly because there were shows I just wanted to talk about on a podcast basis. And since I wasn't really paying attention to new television, it would give me an opportunity to sort of scour the archives, as it were. And William really liked this idea. He thought, if I ever needed a co-host, he wanted to be up front right away. So I said, yes, absolutely, if Nerdist picks it up. They never did. It sort of sat on the back burner. And then a few years later, we had an Oscar bet, and the winner got to create their own podcast, essentially. Or I guess the idea was we get to create a segment on the podcast. And the co-host has to go along with it, no matter how stupid the idea was. That's actually where Tony Delgado reviews frickin' movies came from, if you remember that feature from the B-Movies podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe one of our worst ideas. Maybe our second worst idea after reviewing every episode of Shadowhunters. That was a pretty boneheaded idea right there. But yeah, William won the Oscar bet that year, and he said we're actually going to just do it. We're just going to launch Canceled Too Soon. Why not? So
do it.
We sort of pooled our resources. William did and still does most of the heavy lifting in terms of like the technicals and putting it together.
He edits it.
Yeah, he edits it. Well, we don't really edit it too much, unless we say something offensive.
No.
But yeah, he kind of puts it together. He sort of set up the website, and yeah, now it's a thing. Now it's been going on for over a year, and I think we're 60 episodes in at this point.
And they're all fantastic. Thank you so much, Whitney. Do you have any plugs? You want to plug something?
Well, I'd love for you to your listeners to go over to Cancel Too Soon if they haven't yet. That's you can become a Patreon subscriber as well, but all of the regular episodes are free. It's that podcast where we review all these great old obscure TV shows. We have a huge backlog that listeners have sent in that we're going to be listening, reviewing, and watching. Other than that, just sort of keep an eye out for my various opinions. I'm fun employed right now in sort of the movie review beat, but William and I are still doing video reviews through our Cancel Too Soon Patreon. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Witney Seibold. That's Whitney with no H and Seibold with an EI.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Whitney. Keep rocking, man.
Of course, thank you.